Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the We Are podcast on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. I'm your host, Jarrod Prugar, along with my co-host, Cory Geiger. Cory, whiteout, Penn State, win. What are your thoughts?
Man, just what a great night, Jarrod. I mean, we're just so everybody knows, we're recording this at like 2 o'clock in the morning. So we've been at Beaver Stadium all night long. And folks, if you were at the stadium, I'm sure you had a blast. If you're watching on TV, here's the thing, Jarrod. This is what Penn State football can be, is, aspires to be. Somebody tweeted at me late in the game about what a commercial this was for Penn State. That this was as good of a night as maybe Penn State has had in a while. Not to say Auburn is great, but this is, think about today, Jarrod. College game day, a commercial all day long. SEC opponent, you beat them, you're 3-0, you've got a great recruiting night, a kid already committed during the game. So you've got wins over Wisconsin, Auburn, you're in the top 10. Does it get any better than that when you combine all of those facets for Penn State?
At this stage of the game, I don't think how can it get any better? You finally bring a high-profile non-conference team to Beaver Stadium, and you beat them. And statistically, let's be real, statistically speaking, although it didn't show up on the scoreboard, they outplayed Auburn. James Franklin outcoached Brian Harsin. That's 2 games in a row now or not 2 games in a row, but 2 games out of the 3. And you could say 3 for 3. I mean, last week was Ball State. That's neither here nor there. But has outcoached Paul Chryst and Brian Harsin. Those are 2 pretty good coaches in college football. And that's saying a lot from James Franklin.
Okay. I thought Auburn's coaching was terrible tonight, to be honest with you. Kicking a field goal on 4th and 1 from the 25 when you had been running the ball great. I thought that was a terrible decision.
But can we talk about the goal line fade? Was that like the ghost of Kirk Ciarrocca
I think,
or what?
They hired Kirk Ciarrocca once they got the ball on 1st and goal at the 10, and they have a terrible first down call when you got Nick scrambling and incompletion. The second down call is a conservative, and the third down call was pretty good. It got to 4th and 2. And then you throw that Kirk Ciarrocca fade special. We can break down the Auburn components maybe a little bit more later, because Auburn did some things. If I'm the Auburn media, to be honest with you, I'm ripping these guys because I thought they had a chance to win. But let's look at it from the Penn State perspective. Again, this cannot be overstated. I've harped on this for a few weeks now. You go to Indiana last year and you lose. Then you lose to Ohio State. Your season was essentially over. All the goals that those kids wanted to work for last year, they were gone after a week and a half. And so to compare that to this year, Penn State's not just 3-0. They beat Wisconsin. And how good is Wisconsin? We don't know. But you go to Madison and win. That's a great win. Then you beat an SEC team. I just have to think that everybody associated with the Penn State program is sky high right now. Now, and I wrote this at DK Pittsburgh Sports on the site. Maybe we need to start thinking about college football playoff dreams. There are major obstacles with Iowa and Ohio State out there, Jarrod, but they have put themselves in position right now after 2 of the better wins that any program in the country has had this year. We need to start thinking about the ultimate goals this year.
No, and that's a really good point because there aren't very many teams, if any, in the country that have had 2 highly ranked wins.
Iowa beat Indiana, which isn't very good, but then they beat Iowa State. Other than Iowa, you can make the case Penn State probably has the 2 best wins of any program in the country.
Right, and they've played, and they still haven't played a complete game. The special teams I thought was okay today. Jordan's down, punted, did the kickoff thing. There was not a touch, we're all touchbacks, whatever. Didn't have to kick a field goal. But listen, that run game is struggling, and that's something we can touch on later. But Penn State is at the top of the world, number 1 recruiting class right now. You're 3-0. You're going to rise in the rankings. I think Penn State, early projections have them around 6, and I think that's a really fair assessment of the Penn State program to date.
Yeah, and look, again, it's all about the confidence level of the players in the program. And how about Sean Clifford? We got a lot of things we're going to touch on throughout the podcast, but Sean Clifford needs to be mentioned highly up. 28 out of 32. Let me repeat that for those who maybe don't study the stats. 28 out of 32, 280 yards against an SEC defense. Now, he did throw one interception on a deep throw. He got greedy, but a couple touchdowns. Jarrod, we wondered what kind of quarterback Sean Clifford would be this season. James Franklin, a couple of different times after the game, said Sean managed the game well. Now, I'll ask you, did you think Sean Clifford played a great game tonight, or did he manage the game and do what was necessary?
As far as a game manager, he did exactly what he needed. Now, the offensive line, I thought, played really well in front of him. At times, he had all day to throw.
Yep.
And it was, when that happens, that's great. Now, at that same token, it was only one interception. That was today. He has been relatively mistake-free throughout the first 3 games of the season, and that's what you need. That's what Penn State fans, that's what Penn State didn't get out of Sean Clifford last season.
Yeah, and the 2 long sustained touchdown drives in the first half. This offense is not what I had kind of hoped to see yet. It took a while in 2016 for the Moorhead offense to really get going. It's taken a while for this Mike Yurcich offense to really start to do some of the things that maybe we think it could be. But they did have an 88-yard touchdown drive and a 91-yard touchdown drive in the first half. They came out, boom, boom. You had just mentioned, hey, maybe you get the tight ends involved, and then, boom, they go back-to-back long throws to the tight ends. Good recognition. Couple nice plays on the next one, a big catch by Jahan Dotson, and then a throw by Jahan Dotson for 22 yards. So we started to see some glimpses tonight of maybe what the offense can be. You're right about the running game. But, hey, Sean Clifford is not just taking off and running whenever, things kind of break down. He's staying patient and poised in the pocket. Jahan Dotson is catching everything. We're starting to see just little glimpses, and next week's Villanova, we'll see more of that, and then they've got Indiana. So this season is building up to, look, Iowa and Ohio State. I'm still thinking they lose both of those games. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. Those are incredibly difficult road environments. But regardless of what happens then, Penn State is building confidence and doing everything that it can before then to go into those games thinking they can win.
And listen, it's a very confident bunch. We've heard Sean Clifford. This is the most confident that he's been. It's shown. Jaquan Brisker, this is the most confident our defense has been. And the Penn State defense has played incredibly well over 3 games. They've given up, 43 total points? And in 3 games, and that's 20 tonight. You have 10 against Wisconsin and 13 against Ball State last week.
Yep.
That is a very, very good defense.
Yeah, there's no question. James said during the week that they're playing championship-level defense, and they are. Again, it's early. We've talked a lot about Wisconsin, didn't do a lot of great things, but, hey, they held a good Auburn offense to 20 points. Bo Nix was what we thought Bo Nix would be, inconsistent. He would look good at times. Auburn ran for 180 yards. If you'd have told me that Auburn was going to run for 182 yards, Jarrod, I think you and I talked about it on my radio show the other day. What was kind of the over-under of yards for Auburn that they could win? I would have said, hey, if you're running for 180, I'm thinking they're going to win the game because I thought Bo Nix would be better than he was. But, hey, that defense stepped up, made plays, came up with the stop on the 4th and 2, again, on the Kirk Shiraka fade special. Brandon Smith, this is a key because we are going to talk about pros and cons, positives and negatives. Brandon Smith dropped an interception right to him that probably would have been a pick 6. And if they lose this game, you look back at that play. You always look back at plays differently when you win versus when you lose. Brandon Smith's got to catch that ball. I mean, Neil Riddell from the Altoona Mirror, a longtime colleague of mine, it's one of his pet peeves. He's always talking about they're dropping interceptions. You got to catch the ball when it's right to you. And so those are the things that in a win can still be good learning experiences.
Well, it's one of those the favorite video game quotes. That's why they're playing defense. It's their hands.
Nice,
but when we come back here in the second segment, we'll talk a little bit more about what's good about Penn State football and what's bad about it so far.
And we're going to talk about the damn officiating because that was embarrassing.
We'll catch you right here in a couple minutes on the We Are podcast on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. welcome back to the next segment of the We Are podcast and the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. Cory.
Man.
Oh, man, you alluded to it at the end of the first segment.
Brutal.
I don't know that there is
Absolutely
anything
brutal.
worse than the SEC officiating in Saturday night's game.
Folks, I want to preface this by saying, and Jarrod's a friend of mine. Jarrod coaches youth sports. I'm sure you feel this way. I'm around kids coaching youth sports. I'm around officials a lot. A lot of my good friends are officials. Shout out to guys like Ted Beam, Dick Wagner, working the Altoona Curve press box. I have tremendous respect for officials, Jarrod, as I'm sure you do as well. You know these folks. Officials have hard jobs. They have thankless jobs that you're just expected to be right 100% of the time. I try to make it a personal policy to not criticize officials. Officials don't determine games. If you're going to your kid's high school basketball or football game and you think the official screwed your team and cost your team a win, think back at 15 other plays in that game that your team could have done better. And that's why you won or lost. We have a tendency, would you agree with this? We have a tendency in our sporting culture to just blame the officials for everything.
Right, and some of them deservedly so. I mean, listen, there's a human aspect to the game. It's a game of life, to the game of officiating, and to everything. That's why robot umpires I don't necessarily agree with, because the human aspect of it. But at times, the human aspect is absolutely downright terrible, and that's what we had in this game. First of all, you're playing a home game against an SEC team with an SEC officiating team, and that just is a recipe for disaster, number one. Number two, you expect your officials to be able to count.
Yeah.
And in football, officials only really have to count to 4. How can you mess that up?
Yeah, the intentional grounding call on Sean Clifford where the receiver cut the route short, I didn't quite get a good look at it live, and then I didn't have a replay. So you and I were talking about it. Well, maybe it is grounding if you overthrow it. But there was no pressure on the guy. That's just a bad call. I mean, the receiver cut the route short. You're never going to see that called grounding. And I think there was a lot of confusion from that because they went from that and they put the down marker to third down. That was first down. So Penn State loses a play. Jarrod, look, I go back to, I think it was, this is many years ago, folks, the Colorado and I think Nebraska game where Cordell Stewart got the 5th down. Maybe it was Missouri, Colorado, Missouri, where they got a 5th down. Well, Penn State got a down taken away on that series, and they were punting on third down because both the officials on the field and the replay officials thought it was 4. That can't happen. That can't happen. This is a whiteout game in front of millions of people, an SEC crew that apparently I think was in the SEC title game a couple years ago, I was told. So this apparently is a good crew. So they blow that. You got the P.J. Mustafer run on the fake punt where the pile was still moving forward. You can blow it dead or whatever if the pile stops. He was still moving forward. You get a bad spot there. Penn State should have had a first down. You had a call on Brandon Smith on a late hit out of bounds where he barely touched Bo Nix, and they flagged him for that. I mean, Jarrod, the officiating, and again, I have great respect for officials, but that can't happen. That's unacceptable as poorly as those officials did tonight.
Yeah, and listen, if Penn State loses, you can go back to a lot of those plays, and those are big factors. What happens if that on third down, instead of punting, they get a first down? It's just one of those situations. But there is much more than meets the eye with the officials this year or this game. And listen, it's a hard job. Nobody's perfect. Neither Cory or I are. So, it's just one of those situations. But let's get back to the game.
Let's give Penn State credit because Penn State overcame those calls. And again, if they, as well as I do, anybody who listen to this, you guys would have all gone ballistic if Penn State had lost this game, looking back on some of those calls. But the kids stayed. They stayed mentally strong. One of the players said after the game, might have been Noah Kane, talking about just the mental toughness of the players on this football team. And I do give them a lot of credit for staying the course despite a lot of things going against them.
Right, and I think, honestly, I've said this before, I think this is James Franklin's best coached season. I understand we're only 3 games in.
So far. Where's some wood, Jarrod? You got some wood? We got to knock on. I'm knocking on your shoulder here. Knock on wood.
And that's the thing, though, right? He's won 2 ranked games, but this team is ready to play. We don't have those. We're not seeing the setbacks. We're not seeing the bumps in the road just yet. Like Penn State beat an SEC ranked team, number 22 in the country, Auburn. They went on the road at Camp Randall and won. Penn State is taking care of business, and that's something that they really haven't always done under Franklin.
Yeah, and look, I mentioned the college football playoff earlier. Is Penn State one of the 4 best teams in the country? No, I don't believe that. But a college football season, let's go back to the 2005 season. Nobody thought that Penn State team was, an elite team that year. A season you build on. You build from one game to the next. Even 2016, after Pitt, after Michigan, what Penn State became with each win, growing the confidence, growing the offense. I just see a lot of parallels to both of those seasons, Jarrod, where it's at least possible now. You're not going to have a special season if you lose to Wisconsin. You're not going to have a special season necessarily if you lose to Auburn. But by beating both of these, you keep that special season in line, and we just have to – none of us can predict the future, but you kind of, in the back of your mind, start to think where this could go if this team continues to make the strides from week to week. Villanova this week, Indiana, then Iowa. By the time they get to Iowa, if they're still undefeated and they go out to Kinnick, with a lot of confidence – there's another chance for you to, beat a top 5 team and to continue your special season.
With the way things are going in the top 10, there's a very good chance that when they go to Kinnick in just a few weeks, they could be in the top 4 or top 5 of the country.
Both of them.
Both of them, yeah. And that's, obviously that game is circled on the calendar for everybody, but James Franklin's clearly focused on Villanova by this point in the evening. But it's just going to be one of those situations, and Penn State has the opportunity to continue to build on this confidence. We talked about that in the first segment, but they still have room to grow. We haven't seen the entire offense yet. This is just a vanilla offense. Now, very, very cute offense at times. Too cute, especially.
I want to share a story here. You guys might get a kick out of this. All right, so Mike Yurcich was phenomenal early on with some of the play calls. Later on, they got a little. The one play call to Tyler Warren for the touchdown was great. He went to the well again. Tyler Warren's running out, didn't work. A jet sweep to Jahan Dotson with 1 yard to go. That was a terrible play call.
Up 8, by the way.
So Chris Peterson, the Penn State SID, apparently somebody relayed to James Franklin between the time the game ended and he came down to speak to us in the media, because James already knew, folks, that people were blasting them on Twitter for some of these play calls. He even said, from the Twitterverse, people are thinking that it's too cute. So if you want to know if these coaches are following what people are saying on Twitter, James Franklin knew 20 minutes after the game what some folks are writing on Twitter.
And that's what makes it so funny. But, Yurcich he gets a lot of flack right now. And listen, deservedly so. You're the offensive coordinator for an offense that really hasn't proven anything right now. But at the same time, they're 3-0.
Yep.
Sean Clifford is playing the best football of his career to date. And the Penn State passing game, while it's not, gaudy and they're throwing the lights out of the building by any means, they are productive and they're getting output from 3 receivers.
Hey, Jarrod, you
running
called
backs,
it, the tight ends.
And the tight ends.
We were just talking about it in the press box. You called the tight ends. Tight ends had 130 yards receiving today, Jarrod. If they have that kind of total, this is a very dangerous offense.
And that's 3 different tight ends.
Yeah.
Tyler Warren obviously got time at quarterback, but he was a high school quarterback to boot. But Tyler Warren.
Look at you dropping the. What are you studying Tyler Warren's bio during the game?
Somebody sent me that.
Impressive.
But you've got Brenton Strange, you've got Theo Johnson, and then you've got 3 receivers in Jahan Dotson, who's had a spectacular season. He had a great game tonight, passing and catching the football. And then you've also got Keandre Lambert-Smith, who's been productive, and really the least productive receiver right now of the starters is Parker Washington, and he's still having a really good season.
Yeah, we knew they would have weapons. I got to go back to 28 out of 32. Man, I don't care if you're lining up with your dudes at a high school field playing pickup football, you go 28 out of 32 against anybody at any level. That's impressive. But it's interesting because Sean Clifford didn't look like a great quarterback today. He just looked like a quarterback making all of the plays that you needed to make. And then you look up at the stats, and there they are. The defense, Jarrod, is going to be good. You think about Iowa, you think about Ohio State, you think about Michigan State. Michigan State's pretty good. How are all those factors going to come into play? But if the offense really figures things out, akin to like what that 2016 Joe Moorhead offense did, it became unstoppable as things went on. Again, I know that I'm maybe being overly optimistic here, and I'm not generally accused of being overly optimistic with Penn State. But, hey, at 3-0, if you're going to dream about a college football playoff, you're at least, I think, in the discussion right now.
Yeah, and let's be real. They're doing this without a running game. We saw John Lovett for the first time this year. He was involved in a passing game, one reception, first down for 18 yards on Penn State's last scoring drive. Kevon Lee had a fumble. We didn't see him the rest of the day. Noah Cain is struggling to get it going. That offensive line and pass protection has been pretty damn good.
Yes.
And when you're Sean Clifford at one point, I think, was in the backfield for 12 seconds, and there wasn't a single Auburn Tiger anywhere near him.
Yeah.
It was like the Tiger King just got to all of them. And the offensive line has played rather well in pass protection. But what seems to be the issue in the running game? Is it too many guys? But what is it, Cory? What do you think it is?
Let's see. James makes $6 million a year. Mike Yurcich makes, we think, more than $1.5 million a year. So there's $7.5 million. If I had any freaking answers, I would be coming up here asking for a damn contract because I don't know. I don't know. I don't think the offensive line is opening up holes for the running backs. I think these teams are daring Penn State to throw the ball, and Sean Clifford is beating them. I wish I could break down the all-22 and see everything of what's going on, but the bottom line is the running game it's just not been what you're going to need it to be, and I keep coming back to Iowa and Ohio State, but you're going to need those guys to come up with some plays, and that's one of the big pieces of the puzzle Yurcich is going to have to figure out.
You mentioned it. Teams are daring Sean Clifford to beat them, and he is doing it.
Yeah.
That Wisconsin's front seven is one of the best in the country. They held Eastern Michigan to 16 yards last week. They had a bye this week, so obviously they held their opponent to 0 yards this week because there was none. But 16 yards, even if it is Eastern Michigan, that's pretty impressive. So obviously running against Wisconsin was never going to be an easy thing. Ball State's Ball State. They ran for 240 yards, whatever. But Auburn, you have to get the ball rolling. They had somewhere in the 90s as far as yards go. I believe it was 94 yards. And that's just not going to get the job done later in the season. Because as Sean Clifford is beating teams with his arms, they have 5 receivers that they have to account for. Because if you're running a double tight set or whatever, and you've got Andre Lambert-Smith out there. You've got Jahan Dotson, who is quickly becoming one of the best receivers in college football. And you've also got Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson. You've got Parker Washington, too. And you've got them back out of the backfield. There are so many guys that you have to account for.
There's got to be some scheme things, wouldn't you think, Jarrod, that they get guys in different formations and things, and that's what Mike Yurcich is paid the big bucks to do. But you know what we should talk about in our next segment? USC. Let's take a break here because we didn't get a chance to talk. We only do this one podcast over the weekend, and we've got to address the USC stuff before we move forward.
We're going to hop on a jet plane. Hopefully it's still on the tarmac. They've had a bunch of issues with that throughout the last couple of years. But when we get back for the next segment, we'll talk about USC and what's next for Penn State football moving forward on the We Are podcast on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the We Are podcast on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. He's Cory Geiger. I'm Jarrod Prugar. Listen, we're just getting onto a plane. We're on the tarmac, and the plane is tilting up. Somebody forgot to lock the tail fin. And if that is not the perfect metaphor for the USC program, I don't know what is. But it's not just about planes and tarmacs. Sorry, Lane Kiffin. Doubt that you're listening, but we're sorry to bring that up. But speaking of USC coaches, James Franklin has been linked to USC in every high-profile opening since 2016. Let's put this to bed, Cory. What's next?
That's the thing here. I want to mention this first and foremost so everybody understands. I don't want to just be talking and writing about this all season, okay? But unfortunately, again, we only have the podcast on Sundays. Jarrod and I didn't get to discuss the huge news of the week. And so we're going to do this right now. And unless there's another development, I'm not going to just keep coming back to this either in writing or on the podcast, because we're not going to have an answer to this for 2-3 months, Jarrod. There's a lot of season left. So let's just get this out of the way now. And if you're out there wondering, Geiger, Prugar, get off USC. Look, we got to talk about this. This is something that's important. And I want to say first and foremost that I do not think James Franklin is going to USC. That's my prediction. I wrote a column this week saying that James Franklin to USC would make sense. And it would. It would make sense for James Franklin for a lot of reasons to go to USC. And it would make sense for USC for a lot of reasons to hire James Franklin. It would, if you're out there denying that basic premise, then you just don't understand either situation. But in writing that James Franklin to USC would make sense, Jarrod, I got ripped to hell by a lot of Penn State fans for having the audacity and the gall to claim that Franklin would leave. I don't think he would leave, and I want to get your thoughts on it here in a second. I don't think James Franklin is going to leave. There are pros and cons for both jobs. I can see either way, but to deny the possibility, this is going to be a story. I would be shocked if James Franklin, his agent, has not already had contact with some people involved at USC. Folks, that's just the way it goes. Whatever these coaches say or don't say publicly doesn't mean that there's not a lot of wheels turning behind the scenes.
Right, and wait, you said that people have been on your case in the Penn State fan base?
Never. That's never happened before.
I am shocked.
I only got 2 death wishes this week.
Only 2? That's a step down from last week.
Yeah,
that was a big win.
I haven't gotten any death wishes since the scandal, so that this was a little bit of a shock. But hey,
we're moving up for you.
It goes
Cory.
to show how much passion there is in the fan base, and
right.
I get that. But I think there's also zaniness in the fan base because I think, look, Jarrod, some Penn State fans think that Penn State is the greatest thing in the history of the universe, and that no one would ever consider leaving Penn State for any reason whatsoever, and that is blind devotion, and I think zaniness that fans don't understand. That is just how college football works. It's never been that way at Penn State because you had a coach for 50 years. But that's how generally the rest of college football works.
Right, and listen, it's okay that he is entertaining these offers because guess what that's meant recently? Number 1, raises. Number 2, you're upgrading facilities surrounding Penn State's football program. The Lash building is getting renovated. Beaver Stadium eventually will be renovated and upgraded. Hopefully. You hopefully would hope that
$500 million, man.
The press box.
That's $500 million they got to find. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well, they made $33,000 off the 50-50 tonight.
Nice.
But listen, James Franklin is on his way to being what could be a top-tier coach. He's never going to be a step close to the Sabans or the Swinnies in the world. But at the same time, use it as leverage. It does him no good to come out and say, hey, I'm not interested. Yeah, he might not be fully devoted and fully interested in getting out of Penn State. I don't know why you would leave right now. Again, 3-0, you're one of the hottest teams in the country, hottest on the recruiting trail. Things are really, really looking up for Penn State football. So use this as leverage to get more money for you, more money into your program, and use it for the better good, because athletics is truly the front porch to the university.
Now, again, there are a lot of factors in play here, and we're not just going to go on with this for 30 minutes, but I would want to point out a couple of things here. LA, USC, in a best-case scenario, some people would consider that a better job than Penn State and State College. For some people, Penn State and State College would be better than LA and USC. Well, there's all these taxes in California. How do you make the money work? How could your family come see you? Everybody's different. I have no idea what's going on in James Franklin's heart or his family's heart, and whether or not they truly love State College, Pennsylvania, or if they might consider leaving. None of us can know that. Okay, but the bottom line is James Franklin would be a fool to not listen to USC. And James Franklin is not a fool. He is a brilliant man. He is extremely smart. He knows how to work this. Jarrod, what are you talking about leverage? Well, James got his contract renegotiated. He now makes more than $6 million. This information is not public record. We think Mike Yurcich makes more than $1.5 million. I've heard up to $2 million. We think Brent Pry makes more than $1.5 million. Coordinators at Penn State not too long ago made $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, Jarrod. They've doubled these figures. So when we're talking leverage here, it's not even just about James Franklin's contract. It's about getting more money for your coordinators. How many times have we heard James directly or indirectly talk about the analysts that other programs have? You think if Nick Saban wants to get 5 more analysts to come analyze, what another team does, you think he's going to get a no at Alabama? Penn State kind of has to say no sometimes because they've got these other expenses that you talked about. That's what we're talking about with leverage, folks. James Franklin does not get everything he wants at Penn State. He probably still has to be told no some. Mark Wogenrich from Sports Illustrated wrote a terrific piece, brought real good connecting the dots this week. It wasn't just a few months ago that some members of the Board of Trustees voted against the $48 million upgrade to the Lash Building. You think they're voting against upgrades at Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, Jarrod? So what does that tell you? Some of you fans that think Penn State has it as good as anybody in the world, but yet Jay Paterno and some others are voting against a $48 million upgrade to Lash Building. Now, that thing did ultimately pass, but that's what we're talking about here when we talk about, Penn State is good as it is. There are still some restrictions and limits that James Franklin might feel, even with as much as he's already won in the leverage battle.
And first, before we go any further, that would require Jay Paterno to know anything about the game of college football.
Hi-oh.
But
you going there, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, we've had these conversations before. It's no surprise that he voted against football, but that's neither here nor there. Let's move on.
But what does it say about the people at the school if you're told no ever about... Look, I'm sorry to say this, but Penn State has 31 athletic programs. Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe they every dollar that you can reallocate to your cash king, which is football, can only help football. But Penn State is hell-bent on having 31 athletic programs. I think 27 of them lose money. And those are some of the things that you deal with when you want to be all-encompassing to everybody.
Right, and let's be real. Running college athletics programs is not cheap. You don't always have endless pockets like with Terry Pegula and Kim Pegula. So you need to get that money from somewhere. If we would have driven up separately, Cory, and I would have had to buy a parking pass for this game, it would have been $60. $60 to park in a grass field in the middle of nowhere. That's craziness. But that money helps fund the rowing team, the fencing team, national champions, by the way, the wrestling team. It all helps. And that's why Penn State needed football. If Penn State would have gotten the death penalty, there would be no Penn State. There'd be no Penn State athletics because of the money that football generates.
And see, that's what we're talking about here, that everybody wants to take so much... There's so much passion. So if you even suggest, which is all I did was suggest that maybe James Franklin to USC would make sense, people get offended. How dare you even suggest that James Franklin might leave Penn State? These are the reasons why. We haven't even gotten a name, image, likeness. Ohio State's quarterback, Ewers, is getting $1 million in image and likeness. The Alabama quarterback's getting $1 million. Sean Clifford is selling $60 cameos. Do you see the difference? And that's not a knock on Sean Clifford. If James Franklin or any coach goes to L.A., how much do you think they could get for some of those kids in name, image, likeness? How much could Matt Leinart or Reggie Bush get in name, image, likeness at USC? $1 million?
Could you imagine the money that Reggie Bush would have made legally?
Saquon Barkley. If Saquon Barkley. Yeah. Look, folks, there are so many elements to this. And again, we could go through pros and cons left and right. Ultimately, I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say I think James Franklin stays at Penn State for this reason, and this is the biggest single reason in my mind, Jarrod: job security. If you go to USC and you struggle, because it could be a rebuilding process there for 2 or 3 years, if you struggle more than expected, he could be fired in 2 or 3 years. Yes, he could potentially win a national championship faster at USC, I believe, than he can at Penn State. I still think Penn State's a ways away from getting into a championship game and beating an Alabama, beating a Clemson or a Georgia. Even if they get to the playoff, then you got to beat those teams. I think USC could get to a playoff and win a title before Penn State. And I'm not sorry if I'm offending anybody by saying that, but there are things in place at USC that maybe could allow that to happen. But if he struggles, Jarrod, he could be fired in 2 to 3 years. If he stays at Penn State, he could be here 20 years. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What happens to James Franklin?
I think James Franklin stays. I think, and we talked about this on your radio show, I think as it stands tonight, Penn State as a program is better than USC. Historically, maybe not so much, but right now they are better. So I don't think it makes sense for him to go, but I do think it makes sense for him to say, you know what, I'm going to kick the tires, so to speak,
absolutely,
for leverage, and it's purely leverage. But enough about James Franklin. This atmosphere tonight was absolutely insane in a good way.
Yeah. I enjoy the whiteout, but I'm going to say this. I don't think it really impacted Auburn a tremendous amount. And that was a debate kind of coming in. Some people from the SEC were downplaying the whiteout. I tweeted this before the game. It's stupid to downplay the whiteout. The whiteout is a sensational college football spectacle. It just is. It's spectacular. But to think that Auburn was going to come in here and be intimidated by it, when they go to Alabama and LSU and some other places, I think was downplaying how special the environments are in the SEC.
Right, and if there was a team that was well-equipped to handle a whiteout, it's Auburn. You're playing against...
They came in here in white uniform, Jarrod. I love that. That's basically just thumbing your nose at the whiteout by coming in here in the all-white uniform.
Well, and Bo Nix was the lead stormtrooper, and you know what? He was about as inaccurate as a stormtrooper was in shooting a gun. With some of his deep balls, but the whiteout is back. They had Auburn only had 2 false starts. Penn State had a false start as well. Rasheed Walker.
I honestly didn't really think the whiteout impacted the football game.
No,
I mean it was a cool spectacle, but we've been there before for Ohio State in 2016. I was not there in 2005, but we've seen the whiteout impact the other. I give Auburn credit. And it's exactly what I expected. They're an SEC team. They're used to that. You're not going to scare Auburn by a whiteout. But hey, look, it is a pretty cool deal.
No, and it was obviously 109,958 people. I think was the actual attendance announced. Anytime you can get that many people into a stadium, that's an incredible atmosphere. It was great to be a part of. And driving in, and you were here last week. I obviously was in Pittsburgh covering the Pirates. But, to see the tailgating back is great. But a team like Auburn isn't impacted by that. Next week, though, Penn State brings Villanova to town for a noon game. What are you expecting from Penn State next week?
To beat the crap out of Villanova. That's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting for Penn State to come in and not overlook Villanova like Florida State did Jacksonville State. I think James Franklin's 1-0 mentality. They're going to respect Villanova. Now, I understand Villanova beat Richmond Saturday. That's a nice win. Richmond's had a nice program. I hope Villanova comes in here and gives a little bit of a good effort, but I don't expect Penn State to take them lightly. I expect them to get up big, score a lot. Maybe we'll see Taquan Roberson for the entire fourth quarter. And it's going to be one of those things where as much hype and enthusiasm and energy as there was about this game against Auburn, there really won't be any of that against Villanova. I've covered Penn State long enough to know that when these kind of game weeks show up, the Penn State fan base kind of does a collective yawn and starts to look ahead to the next big game.
Right, and let's be real. The student section was filled up almost an hour before the game.
Yeah, they did a good job with that.
And the entire stadium was filled about 30 minutes before the game. That's not going to happen against Villanova. And really, let's be honest. It shouldn't. It's a noon kickoff game, but you can't overlook the Wildcats. But now with Penn State, I would imagine they're going to be in the 6 to 8 range.
I think maybe I haven't looked at the entire top 10.
As far as
probably 8, maybe.
Yeah, I think as high as 6 and as low as 8. I think they do move up because this was a ranked game. This is an important game. But now, when you're playing teams like Villanova, now you're going for style points.
Yeah.
Now you're looking to run it up.
It's not even just style points. It's making sure, just like against Ball State, you get control of the game and then you get a bunch of dudes in games because we still may need to see Taquan Roberson in a key situation this year, Jarrod. You're going to feel better the more snaps he can get against a Ball State or a Villanova.
Leave no doubt, because you look at the scores here. Oklahoma struggled with Nebraska. Maybe this is Nebraska being back.
Good for Nebraska. I'm glad to see that.
23-16. Oklahoma's the third-ranked team in the country. Texas A&M 34-0 over New Mexico. Cincinnati struggled in the first half against Indiana. Indiana's best player gets knocked out due to what I thought was a bogus targeting call, but my opinion really doesn't matter. They end up winning. Just going through some different scores through the Big Ten, or through the top 10, I should say. West Virginia beats Virginia Tech for the Black Diamond Trophy. That was kind of cool. I think Neil Brown's doing a great job at WVU. And then you just kind of look down the line. Alabama and Florida. Florida beats
gave
Florida
Alabama
by 2.
Everything. I watched that. I was stunned. Alabama was up 21-3 in that game, and that's typically when Alabama puts its foot on your throat. And Florida, give them a lot of credit for coming back. So, but look, I will say this as we kind of wrap this up, Jarrod. Penn State's in great shape. It'll be 4-0 next week. I think, and then Indiana comes in, and I think Penn State's got that game circled. So, as I've said a couple times here, there is so much reason for optimism with the football team right now. And when you compare that to the 0-5 start last year, it is just so different, night and day.
No, and absolutely, and I think that's the beauty of coaching too. James Franklin turned the season around last year, kind of bit the bullet and really got the team back to where they started. They've now won 7 games in a row, and that's without a bowl game. They didn't go to a bowl game last season. They win the last 4. They've started with winning their first 3. I think it goes to 4-0 next week, but for now, it's on to Villanova and the Wildcats. And for Cory and I, we've got to get home, get to sleep because...
What time is it, Jarrod? It's 3:01 a.m. when we finish this up. Hopefully everybody enjoys. We're trying to have some fun with these podcasts, but for a late night, man, these things are getting recorded very late.
We are night owls by trade. We just do it all here with the We Are podcast on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. For Cory Geiger, this has been Jarrod Prugar. Thank you, and we'll talk to you after the Villanova game next week.